Manchester City beat Chelsea 3-1 at the Etihad Stadium, which means that Manchester City now sits in 4th and they're back in Champions League spots. And honestly, a very underwhelming performance from Chelsea. And I've been saying this for a long time now that anytime Cole Palmer goes missing, the rest of Chelsea goes missing as well. And we're going to break down all of the tactics in this video because I do think it was an absolute masterclass from Pep Guardiola, who gets the better of his former student, Enzo Maresca. So for all of the Pep haters and all the people talking shit, Pep just showed exactly why he's the best manager in the world and why Chelsea, in my opinion, are a little overhyped at the moment. We're going to go into all the details, but before we do, let's start with one of the main talking points in this match, and that's the two new signings for Manchester City. Abdulkadir Kusanov and Omar Marmoush, to everyone's surprise, were in the starting 11. Kusanov with probably one of the worst 5-minute performances that anyone's ever had, and Marmoush almost scoring a minute into the game and looking really dangerous in the attack throughout the entire match. Kusanov's performance was the perfect example of how there's levels to this game, and even playing in League One in France is not the same as being thrown into a match between Manchester City and Chelsea. And to be fair, that's the big risk that Pep and Manchester City took by putting both of them on the field at the same time after only one training session with the team. And for me, it's one thing to jump into a match after only one session, but it's another thing to do it for a team that's coached by Pep Guardiola, who's very strict about his tactics and the positioning of the players. It's something that I don't think you can learn in just a couple of days, so I knew there was going to be a lot of pressure on Kusanov, especially since he plays center back, and any mistake that he makes from that position is most likely to lead to a goal. And while the Manchester City players try to encourage Kusanov after all the mistakes, you can also tell that there were a few situations after the first 5 minutes in which they changed their minds about playing him a pass, and instead they just went somewhere else. And I think for Kusanov, the fact that Manchester City's high press was so effective against Chelsea and how Manchester City denied Chelsea the opportunity to play out and build just allowed him to not have to be as involved as probably Chelsea would have liked him to be. So let's get into the reasons specifically why City dominated Chelsea and how Pep outsmarted Maresca. The first one is eliminating Cole Palmer's influence and limiting his touches on the ball. I think this was a big topic of the training sessions all week for Manchester City because they know that anytime Cole Palmer goes missing in the game, Chelsea loses all of its attack and its potential. They did this specifically with Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, İlkay Gündoğan, even Kevin De Bruyne when he came on, all playing a part in blocking Palmer from receiving any passes. He was basically being man-marked throughout the entire match, and even when they had to press in front, they would screen Palmer to make sure that the passing lane was still closed. When Chelsea did establish some possession, City at times would even create a box around Palmer to make sure that he was trapped between multiple City players. And so Chelsea would bring Enzo Fernandez back a bit more and leave Palmer higher up in hopes that they could find Enzo or Caicedo first and easier, and then get the ball to Palmer in higher areas. But I think City were too good in their defensive shape, and even though it would leave the wide players open at times, Chelsea just weren't good enough to take advantage. Besides this, and always shifting him off if needed, it made it very difficult for Cole Palmer to find any space, and without that, they couldn't get the ball to any of their forward players either. And so Cole Palmer, getting frustrated, anytime he would get the ball, he would end up in positions where he was just too deep and he couldn't really create. And I think Palmer's ability in the final third is what gets Chelsea so many opportunities, that him getting the ball in the position of the 6 was really the only consistent way that he could be involved, but it wasn't really dangerous at all. And so with all of that, Manchester City completely neutralized Chelsea's biggest attacking threat. The next part that Guardiola got right was the high press. Goal kicks, live play. City did not want Chelsea building out, and if they were going to beat the press, it would have to go through a long ball. And City, I think, felt comfortable defending this instead, and I said this in my pre-match preview, City was going to have to find a way to eliminate all of Chelsea's attacking players, and while it was a risk to high press, players like Sancho and Madueke do not want to be contesting long balls all game. And when City had the ball in the first half, Chelsea tried to sit back a little bit more. They would drop into a 4-4-2 or a 4-5-1, and I think they wanted to frustrate City to force some mistakes and also not make it easy to get a ball into Haaland. But City were technically much better than Chelsea to find those small gaps and create a lot of chances on the weak side. And I think this is where City and Pep specifically outclassed Maresca. If you look at Kovacic, Bernardo Silva, and İlkay Gündoğan's positioning, it was brilliant. Kovacic played more like a center back in possession, almost always dropping in between the two center backs, and the reason why this was so important is because now that he pops into the back line, it means both fullbacks from City could push up and make forward runs. So with City now having a back 3 essentially, Guardiola and Matheus Nunes had a lot more freedom. And so Kovacic and sometimes even Gündoğan and Silva would be able to pick the ball up in a deep position with no pressure on them at all because Chelsea were sitting back and play a longer ball in behind the back line. Pep's use of the fullbacks to be more attacking-minded players while still having enough numbers in the back was genius, and it worked to create chances that led to their first goal. It really was brilliant from Pep that his two most dangerous players ended up being his fullbacks. The last piece, and the part that I think really broke Chelsea at the end, was that they changed their tactics at halftime. They went from a low press in the first half to a high press in the second. Obviously, they wanted to be more effective and recover the ball quicker, but they also knew that Kusanov, anytime he received under pressure, they could try and press him and win it back. But once again, Pep was one step ahead of Maresca. Instead of playing short and building out under a high press, they started to play longer, knowing that Haaland would be 1v1 with one of the Chelsea center backs, and they favored that matchup. But going into even more detail, what City did with the other attacking players is what really made all of this work. Instead of being side to side or on the same line as Haaland, they would drop deeper, so now the ball to Haaland would leave him with loads of space and no covering defenders for Chelsea because they were obviously busy man marking the deeper players. You pair that with a completely lost Robert Sanchez, and Haaland is able to score his goal basically on an empty net. And then to finish the game off, City did the same thing again. A long ball from Ederson for a flick on from De Bruyne to Haaland, who was 1v1. And by this point, Foden is making a run into the open space and he's through on goal. The space that they created themselves by staying underneath Haaland is the same space that they ran into once Haaland received. And even though Chalobah is much faster than Foden in a foot race, City's positioning allowed him enough time to eventually score. 3-1, game over. I did predict that this game would be more of a battle of individual performances rather than tactics. I thought the tactics would even themselves out, and ultimately it would be who had the better players. But looking at it and breaking it down, I was completely wrong. Pep's tactics were far better than Enzo's, and Enzo had no solutions to any of the problems that City gave him. And even when Enzo tried to switch it up in the second half by pressing, City were one step ahead and made the adjustments look so easy. So I guess we have to ask ourselves the question, are City back? And my answer is absolutely. Top 4 finish, no doubt for me. Chelsea, on the other hand, need to find alternate solutions than just Cole Palmer having a good game, because teams will just man mark him and eliminate the rest of Chelsea's game plan. But I do think that Maresca learns from this and he fixes it as the rest of the season goes on, which leads me to believe that they're still going to finish in the top 4, right under Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester City. But there's still a lot of season left and many things can happen, so I guess we'll find out. If you guys enjoyed this analysis, let me know in the comment section, as well as don't forget to subscribe, because I'm doing a tactical analysis every single week for big games, and I'll continue to do these as well as the pre-match previews and loads of other content. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll catch you in the next one.